Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited to see you. Let me see. It seems like the video is not coming through. Is it coming through? Can you let me know in the chat if you see my video? I've been trying for the last 45 minutes to get this video set up and it just does not want to work. So technology definitely has a mind of its own. I do have two different cameras going as well, so please bear with me. Let me know in the comments if you can hear me, if you can see me. Great, thanks so much, Jan, for letting me know you can see me. Okay, Taisha, great to see you. Elisabetta, so nice to see you. Bert, Bill, Carol, Nikki, Marianne. Oh my goodness, so many people joining. I am so excited that you're here. And can you let me know, do you hear me okay? Is the sound loud enough for you? Do I need to put the microphone closer? Just let me know as well in the comments. People are joining right now, so I'm going to give them just a few minutes to join, but I want to give you an overview about what I'm going to do today. So I've been invited to one of my really good friends' weddings. We've been friends since we were 12 years old, so a really, really long time. And she's having a wedding. She's gonna get married. Super exciting. And I decided I want to make a dress for this wedding. She did say that it's gonna be more of a casual wedding, so not super dressy, not super formal. But I do have some inspiration as well. Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much that you can hear me, letting me know that. Wonderful to see all of you. Morena, sorry. CJ, Don. Oh, so nice to see so many familiar names in the chat as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Let me see if my other camera is working. Switching over. I know it's not the best image here. I had to switch to my webcam because my professional camera was not working. So I've been in a bit of a rush. I'm going to move this a little bit closer so we can see it a little bit better. Hopefully, bear with me. Okay, getting it a little bit closer. Hopefully that's good. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go even a little bit closer like this. So this was my idea or my inspiration was the lower part and the midriff, changing up the upper section. You might have seen on social media that I did already a sketch with the fashion design book. So that's gonna be my sketch or my design right there. More of a scooped neckline, a little bit more squared off there. Princess seams and then pleats. Okay. I went ahead and did a fitting of my sloper, and I can show you those fitting photos. So it's been a while since I have, since I have used this exact sloper because I have several different slopers. This is my more fitted sloper. So I went ahead and put it on to check it out to see how it was fitting. And then I went through and I pinned it, because I wanted it to be even tighter for that midriff section. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to make this update onto my sloper. And I also checked the back. I can see that the cross back is pretty wide on this, and it's causing a little bit of wrinkles. Some of those wrinkles are just from the pinning there. And we have a little bit of extra in the back as well. I'm going to be nipping the back at the side seam to make it a little bit tighter there. And then we're going to be really form fitting that area as well there. So what I like to do with my sloper, this is my more fitted sloper that I made with my moulage. So I first drafted the moulage and then I made a sloper from the moulage, from the Making a Moulage online course that I teach. And then I did about 1.5 inches of ease, which is about let's say about 3 centimeters of ease in the circumferences for a more fitted sloper. And then because I want to get such a tight fit in that midriff area, like that's called a midriff, so the kind of very fitted waist area, we're going to be pinning and making it tighter so that we get a really nice fit in that area. And then I went ahead and did my design lines according to my sketch. So I used design tape. It's on this black kind of roll, and I just used the tape to kind of eye it and see where I wanted to put things. And I did that directly onto my sloper. So that's been my preparation before starting to draft the pattern. And then I'm going to be using this to measure it out and put it on my sloper. And I only did the front because it's quite hard to do the back unless you have the dress form. That's the dress form I did with the Making a Moulage course directly with my customized moulage. So it really is a body double here. And what I can go ahead and do is I've got cords going everywhere. Okay, bear with the cords, hopefully. Okay, let's see how that is. Oh, not great, but okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put my sloper onto my dress form here. And hopefully you can see it well enough. Now, when I was doing this in the mirror, I realized actually when I took it off that it was mirrored. So it's not exactly, the folds are going on this side, and I do want them to be on the other side. So I'm gonna pay attention to that when I am drafting. And I'm gonna go ahead and pin this onto here, which I don't have my pins exactly handy, but I'll use what I've got here. Because I still need to design the back as well. I have an idea of what I want for the back there, but it's not been drawn out. So usually you should draw it out if you really want to know exactly what you're going to do. But this gives us a good reference as well of what it looks like, right? So we have two options. We could be measuring it when it's flat on the table, or we could measure on the dress form. Just for the sake of ease, I might do a little bit of both because I'm going to be switching cameras, and I do want you to see the measuring process. So normally if it was just me and not for film, I would usually be measuring kind of up from here and over. If I have any seam allowances on here or seam lines, I would measure from the seam line because my pattern does not have any seam allowances. So make sure to make note of that. For instance, this is going directly to the edge of my neckline here, and I would measure it out just to make sure, because actually I usually do seam allowance, but this has been such a long time since I made the sloper. It's been about 3 years, 3.5 years. And, you know, you have so many different slopers and you use different amounts of ease for different things. I haven't really been making super fitted garments in a while. I've been doing a little bit more knits and such and things for my household. So we can go ahead and measure the garment and just check quickly. Does it include the seam allowances? Does it not? If you don't have the seams marked on your sloper and if it's been a while like me. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the overhead shot. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. It would be actually nice if I did kind of a quick idea for the back. What I think I want is a deeper back neckline, but I don't want my bra to show. A good reference for bra showing or not would be the band that comes across under the arm. And I want to kind of eye that because I want to definitely clear that. I want to wear a normal bra with this. So I would say my neckline is going to be somewhere around here, and it's going to come up like that. I'll get to that when I get to the back, but it's good to just know before you start doing the front because sometimes things can match up to the back or they might not match up to the back if we're not designing thoroughly and thinking through the whole garment. That's why I really do generally like to sketch the front and the back, but I kind of know in my head I'm going to be doing this open back neckline. Whenever we have an open back neckline, meaning it's deep and maybe a little bit wider up here, and we have a deeper neckline in the front, guess what happens a lot of the times? Those shoulder straps like to fall off. And since I am making the shoulder straps a little bit wider, they would likely not fall off in this case. But since I'm going to be dancing in this, and I'm gonna have fun at the party, the wedding. I'm probably gonna be putting a little ribbon in the back here and doing a bow. And I think that would actually look really cute as well for the design of it. And then having the low kind of V-neck in the back, probably a princess seam back here. We're gonna have the midriff extending all the way to the center back. I am gonna have a center back seam as well so that we can have nice shaping in the back. As far as pleats go, I'm not going to have any pleats in the back, but I will continue those princess seams probably all the way down. All right, so that's what I'm thinking of, and let's go ahead and get to work with the drafting. Are there any questions so far? I am going to try to go back and forth. There is about a 20-second delay with this, and of course, I really wish you could see the lines really well. I think you can see them. I've done them in marker, and if you can't see them, please let me know in the chat. We're going to be working with the white pattern. This pattern has pencil lines, so it's not as strong. I just did a copy of it, and I'm really sorry that the focus comes in and out with this webcam. I don't have my professional camera set up. Unfortunately, it was not connecting, but hopefully you can see it, and hopefully you ignore this blur in, blur out because of the movement. I'm really sorry. It's focusing for my hand movement, unfortunately. So, all right. So we often work with the pattern this way in correlation to our body. Of course, you can work with it this way as well. It just depends on what you're doing and what your preference is. My fabrics that I'm using is this. It's a herringbone that my mom gave me, which, Mom, if you're watching, I hope you're okay if I'm using this, because I told her that I would make her something out of it, and I never did, and I feel really guilty, but I love the fabric, and she told me I should make something with it. And then this is going to be my lining, just something fun. And I'm hoping I can make this fabric work. Unfortunately, there are little holes in it from moths, I think, and I don't know if I'm going to have enough. But if I don't, I do have some backup fabrics. I've done the drape test already. And if you've taken the Mastering Garment Ease course, or if you have the fitting book, the fashion design book, I talk about this drape test, and we study this a lot in all of the courses. Actually, the most we study the fabrics is the Define, Design, and Love Your Style course, and that we really look at the drape of styles like the style that I'm doing. And if we look at that quickly, hold on one second. Okay, that is going to have a higher drape, but it still has enough structure to hold the pleats. So it's kind of more of a medium drape fabric average, I would say right in the middle, but possibly even a step higher, meaning closer to more body and less drape, but it still hangs really close to the body. So it's a little bit tricky, but we want a fabric that hangs close to the body. That will. It's got a nice drape to it. It's going to hold the pleats. I tested other fabrics, and I did that actually. I think, let me see if I can find those images quickly. 1 second. Okay. So I tested some different pleats with the different fabrics here to see what would work. And I also tested it the direction of the pleats, because in the original photo, they had the pleats going up. I don't want the pleats going up because it's going to work against gravity. When we have the pleats going down, they work with gravity. So that's the pleats going up with a fabric with high drape. You can see a high drape fabric is not going to hold the pleats unless it was a really fitted and tight style. So these are the kinds of tests I like to do before I even start drafting. I like to make sure I have done the drape test. I like to drape it on my body or my dress form. I like to test it out and see how it's looking, and then do those tests. And I try different fabrics out. This was another one that I was trying out. That was a higher drape. This would hold the pleats nicely. And that would be my backup option. It's just a little bit more dressy than what I want for this. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take the sloper, off the dress form so that we can start measuring it and marking our pattern. And we're gonna go with this side over here. This is the wearer's right side over here. And we're going to be marking our princess seams. I can literally just cut the pattern apart and start playing around with it. I can also measure it. So the first thing I want to do is do a measurement test and see what is this measuring over here and here. Do I have my seam allowances on there? And I do have those seam allowances on there because I'm hopping over, and I have about 3/4 of an inch, which is 2 centimeters. And 3/4 of an inch would be meaning that I have 3/8 of an inch on the neckline and 3/8 of an inch over here. So I need to, anytime I'm taking any measurements from the armhole or the neckline, I need to measure off of that measurement. So I have to take off the 3/8 of an inch. Imagine the seam line, the cut line is here. The seam line is 3/8 of an inch in, which is 1 centimeter. Okay, I do see a question. I'm going to pop over. Brandy is asking, are you going to show the process of drafting the back as well as the front? Yes. So exactly, I'm going to be doing the front and the back because I need both in order to make the dress. There's a lot of videos online about front pattern manipulation, but I haven't found nearly as much about the back. Yes, we are going to do the back as well because I need both pieces and I need to make this dress soon. The wedding is coming up. Okay, so it might be easier for me to show it this way, just so you can visually see it easier. All right. So that means 3/8 of an inch I'm taking off and I'm not including in my measurements, which is 1 centimeter. I do have the measuring tape in both options in case you can't see. Hopefully you can see the image well enough. If not, you can always make the video enlarged on your screen. I'm wanting to take the inside edge of my design tape and I'm going from this dart over and I'm going to just mark that amount here. Now, if I was measuring from this edge over, I would take off the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and then measure. But I'm going to be measuring from darts and kind of from different positions. So that is position here. And I am using marker, but you should always be using pencil. What was that? 1 1/8 about. Okay. And then we just go through and we start measuring down. So we can start at different areas. I like to work my way down the garment, just like in fitting, where whenever we're fitting, we're usually fitting from the top down, unless it's too tight. If it's too tight, we need to loosen it up first, and then we start the fitting. Okay, so I can see here, and I kind of measure that out, and that's 7 1/4 or 18.5 centimeters. So 7 1/4. And then I'm going to square that off at the front. And then I can kind of, if I was just using pencil, I would really draft this in straight, but I don't want it to be fully straight. I want it to come in and then kind of come out like this. So I would kind of give an eye, and that's why I like using pencil, because we can kind of erase it as we go if we are not pleased with the lines. But I want something like that, that it's wider up top and it's more narrow in this section here. Now I have to account for this dart. We are going to close that dart in the process. And since the sloper is already closed, when we're measuring from the seam line of the darts. Okay. Now, of course, I didn't mark this armhole on that side, but we can just do the same thing over here. On this side, we'll just measure from the dart over. So 1 3/4 inch, 4 and 4.3 centimeters. And that's a pretty wide strap. So if we ignore the dart, That is a fairly wide strap. I might end up changing it. I can then also check this here. And actually this here is getting pretty close to my seam line here. This is the curve of the armhole. And that's pretty close. So we will end up just taking a slight bit off here and here. Now, when I was doing my fitting, I did do a little bit of pinning at the armhole area here to tighten it up. So I'm actually going to be marking that amount on my pattern here to take it off. So it is about 3/16 of an inch, which is about a 1/2 centimeter. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to deepen the dart that much on each side. And then whenever I do that, I X out the old or erase it. And I'm going to straighten this out here and here. And this was kind of my new armhole, just shaving off a tiny bit there. And then I can see it's a little bit lower than the 3/8 of an inch at the side seam here. That's the side seam. This is the armhole. We're going to come down, and that's about, I would take maybe the middle of the design tape there just to be safe. I don't want it to get too low for the bra to show. So I take up about 3/4 of an inch from here, which means there's 3/8 of an inch of seam allowance plus the 3/8 that I would take off here. So taking off 3/8 of an inch, which is 1 centimeter. And then I would just blend that line in nicely. But I'm gonna wait to do that until I get my princess seam marked, okay? So the princess seam was hard to mark because of all the darts coming into that lovely point that we have. We're gonna be shaving off that point so that it's not too pointed. And I wanna also mark this dart a little bit deeper in this lower section here, okay? So we're gonna do that next. And I do flip through the ruler and the tape measure. Now, the general rule, what I learned was using the bendable tape measure on garments is better, and using the flat ruler on pattern pieces is generally more accurate. Except measuring curves, then my teacher always liked me to use the curved or the bendable one. Okay, so I'm going to mark that down. That's right about where those notches are anyways. And then I'm deepening up that dart the amount that I pinned. And that is, it's a little bit deeper further down. Now you can see I'm also not taking the edge of the tape measure just because I'm just so used to doing it kind of anywhere I grab the tape measure just to make it quicker. But there's not a right or wrong way. Like you could definitely go from the edge and see quickly how much it is. I just have these habits of getting stuff done as quick as I can from working in the industry for so long. And you're often just taking the tape measure wherever it's at. Okay, so we're gonna deepen up these darts. And that's the nice thing about having a sloper, that, you know, even if it's not the perfect ease amounts, you still have such a great starting point, and you can always do another quick fitting and see if you're pleased with that ease amount. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the midriff on here, and I have that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so I'm going to remove that. And then I'm gonna measure down from there, or I could measure the whole amount and take it off. So that is, I'm gonna go to the lower design line here, or the edge of the lower part. Okay, that's 4 1/4. That's about 11 centimeters. Okay, and that's to the edge here. So I'm gonna go up here. And that's why I don't like to cut things off as I'm going, because if I would have cut the armhole to the new armhole curve, I probably would have forgotten that I did that adjustment here, right? So I'm gonna go to the top line because that's where I measured from that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, jumping over that dart here, and then getting the positioning here, 4 1/4. And that's about 11 centimeters. Then I also have the center front
positioning. And I can do a check here as well for the center front neckline. So we have 4 5/8, and I have the seam allowance there. So that's close. It's about 1/8 of an inch off. I'd rather have it a little bit higher there than a little bit lower for the fitting sample, and then I can always adjust it then. I probably won't even do a fitting sample. It'll just be going straight to the garment because I know this fits me. Then I'm going to do another check. So from here all the way down to the midriff, and that's there. And where that was with the seam line. So I'm going to take that off. So I can hold that exactly where it's at. I can take off the seam line here. Imagine that's the seam allowance edges there. And then I can see, kind of eyeing it, is that close to where I want it to go? Yes, it is. Another thing I can do, I hope it's not too blurred. There we go. Okay. Okay. So that's actually completely perpendicular to the center front. What do you know? That's pretty good measuring. Design tape. It's a little bit, let's see, it's a little bit coming down here actually, if I look at kind of my waistline, which I'd rather have it coming down a slight bit than coming up for this style. It's totally up to you though, what your preference would be. But I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I would say that's going to be really, really nice there. But I have to consider that the back also is going to have that. And I might get then a slight dip there. I would definitely true the seam of the back once we get to that. Okay, so this is looking great. I'm going to go ahead and mark the midriff position. So I went to the bottom of this line. I'm going to go to the bottom of this line. And the reason why I'm going to the bottom is because you want a little bit of ease in the length. And if you go too high up directly on the bra lines underneath the underwires, sometimes it can, when you're moving, it can feel like it's kind of creeping up too much. So I'd rather have that little bit of extra ease in the length. Okay, so that's pretty close to 2. I'm going to go with 2 for that measurement here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to X out my waistline so I don't mix that up with my design line. Okay, so that's going to be that line, that line. All right, so we've got lots of marks here. And now we're going to go ahead and start cutting the pattern apart. And that's going to be a little bit easier. We're going to go something like that. And then probably take this off, something like that. So I'm going to mark the new darts here. Okay, now the thing is, for the lower section below the midriff, I'm going to be doing a lot of pleats, so we're not going to adjust the dart lower than this. If you wanted it really fitted, you could adjust the dart all the way down, but I'm not going to because there's going to be pleats. We're going to be adding fullness instead of taking it away. Okay, oops, that's getting a little bit deep there. So I want something like that. Okay, and we're going to X out the old lines. All right, so you can see I did a slight curve there just from my bust. I'm going to probably be smoothing this out a little bit as we go. The curve might end up being a little bit higher. Actually, I might straighten that. We'll check how it is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start cutting and closing everything up. So I'm going to be I'm not going, I'm going to do a tentative line for my yoke or midriff. Okay, and we'll just go 2 inches, 5 centimeters. And that's that all of these lines are going to change a little bit once we get the back on there or once we cut them apart. And sorry for the noise. Okay. So I'm going to cut the upper section of the midriff and then the princess seam. So that's the outer line, the deeper line that we just made. We're using that one. And then here we're using the under dart line. All right. And if it's pointy at the apex, that is totally normal. I already did a slight curve here to add there. It's looking pretty good. But once I close this, okay. We're gonna get that. Okay, so we have a few different options for this shoulder dart. We can, since we've gone directly to the apex, we can just close it, which is going to give you the best fit. Sometimes if you don't have a princess seam, you can shift that dart into other darts to make it fewer darts, or you can add tucks up here to get rid of it, pleats, design lines, anything like that. But since we've already decided, okay, we're doing the princess seam, we can easily close it. It is a curved dart on the moulage and the sloper, but we're going to pretend like it is a straight dart because whenever we slash and close, it has to be straight in order for the fabric to lie flat. So we're going to fold it back and fold it closed, or we could just cut it and close it as well. So we're going to be folding it closed from this point here at the shoulder all the way down. And it's hard to get it. You know, sometimes it's easier on the paper to draw it straight as well. So we can go ahead and draw it straight, and we could cut it if it's getting too narrow to close. That's another option. And you might think like, okay, that's not that deep of a dart, but it does make a difference on the fit. So I'm cutting along the straight line I just marked, just to make it easier to close it. And then I'm closing it to the line I just marked, that straight line. So now we've got two darts closed. We have the shoulder dart closed. We have the side dart closed. Here and here, and we've maintained our beautiful shape of our 5 dart sloper made with the moulage. And that's what I love about the moulage, is we don't have to do the contour shaping because it already has the contour in it. We have this front dart here, which actually we have to remember that I did not measure the dart closed. Yeah, so the positioning of this actually might not be correct. Let's see. Okay, so we have this much. So technically this should go down a little bit, which means that this is kind of coming over here. I'm going to keep it where it's at right now. And when I do finish this up, I'm going to put it on the dress form and I'm going to do a quick check. And if I need to lower the midriff down, I'll do it later. Because this dart, we basically ignore this. If we had a wrap dress or something like that, where the neckline is cutting through this, like a wrap dress might have this, that's when we use that dart and we can close it up and make it really fitted so it's not gaping in this area. We could take a little bit of this out and close it here in this area. So that is another option. And usually the amount that you would do that tends to be about half of the amount of this dart you can take from here, and that would be like traditional contouring. So that could be an option. And since it is a little bit lower, I might go ahead and do it, but I might just take it, instead of half the dart, just take it about a quarter of the dart, which would be a tiny, tiny bit, 1/8 of an inch. And the amount to do this is kind of based on the neckline, on how high you have it or how low it is. The lower it is, the more you would want to take out of the neckline so it sits nice and flush against the body here. And we're going to close that as well. So the closer this neckline is to this dart, the deeper we would take it out. Let's say it's about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters from this dart. We would want to pinch out a little bit more, like half the amount. Since it's about 2 inches up, 5 centimeters, I'm taking out about a quarter of the depth here. And that's just kind of a based on experience type of thing, but that's usually the general rule that I follow. If it's any higher up, I usually just leave it. I don't adjust it. Usually it's not needed. And if it's ever crossing over that in a wrap dress, I would close the full amount wherever that ends up being. Okay, so let's close this amount here. And I'm gonna go ahead and true in the neckline quickly. We're gonna probably be changing this area of the neckline once we get to the back, but it's okay. So this is called truing the seams. Whenever we make it and make the curves really nice and clean with the curves. And this is the French curve that I absolutely love. If you've taken my pattern making courses, you know that I am all about this curve and this hip curve. It's one of those things that really, I've tried so many other rulers and I always come back to these. So we can put a link in the description if you want to have a link to the tools I recommend. Okay, I'm going to quickly check the comments. How is everyone doing? Cindy, it's great to see you. Nancy, great to see you. Thanks for joining. Dorian. Dorian, I think that's Laura. It's great to see you all joining. I'm so happy you're here. Okay, so I'm going to cut off the neckline. Even though it's not final until we get the back done, it's where we want it to be for now. Okay, and then I'm going to cut this little bit closed right here. Oops. And close that there and tape it shut. Okay, so we've eliminated that dart now, and we're going to go ahead and cut off this dart from the armhole. We don't need that anymore because that's going to be our princess seam. All right. And now we're going to cut apart the midriff here. And we're going to cut this away from the outer line that we marked. Okay. So we've got a little bit of a strange thing going on here. We want to make sure that's not coming to a point. I went ahead and added the curve to this, but really you could even do it straight here and then you can add the curve later or correct this later. So I would probably take it off here, but that's quite a bit, right? So we have, if we imagine this had gone straight down, we wouldn't want to shave off too much because it is giving us the contour, and we also have to make sure it's all matching up still at the end, which the armhole is slightly off on this this sloper. Okay, we're looking pretty good, but I am a little bit afraid of getting rid of that much there. So we have a couple options. If we imagine this, I don't know if you can see it. So this is currently my line. It's not a pretty line. And normally I would just shave it off. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit and then go in between the two like that. So it's going to, instead of shaving it off there, I'm going to be adding a bit to the curve where I added here. just giving it a little bit here to get a nicer line. That's the goal. So we're going to add a little bit here, and then we're going to take a little bit off. And those are the kinds of things that you just have to, as you're going along, you don't want to have any points, right? Like this point here would not have looked good at all. So we're going to take that little point off. We've added just a tiny bit to the apex, which is going to hopefully make sure we don't have a point here as well. And we could probably shave a bit off of this because now this is getting really, really curved. And it's still kind of pointing. And as you know, when we're making that moulage, we're always kind of shaving a bit off. We're making a really nice curve there. And we can always double check it with the ruler as well. Okay. All right, so that's my princess seam part is done. And we've taken this off here, and I'm going to take this off. Just reducing the scratch paper in the back. Okay. All right, so I'm going to X out this, X that out, X out everything so that I know I've already done it. Everything is done on this piece. It's still not exactly smooth, but it should be okay. We'll see. We can always adjust that in the sewing as well. We can leave bigger seam allowances. I'm not so sure if I love how straight this is. If I imagine this is going here, okay. I think it's okay. You can always adjust the line and the position. If you're putting it together and you're imagining it and you're like, oh, I don't like this, you can move it as you wish. And now that I've made an adjustment at the curve here, we need to make sure that this is lining up. So we can walk the patterns together, or we could measure each side. I tend to like to walk them together. Okay, and that's lining up really nice at the apex. Okay, but we're off in the armhole. So I would actually eliminate this line here, this old line that I wanted to adjust, and I would probably kind of go in the middle of those two to make sure it's a nice smooth contour. Okay. And we would go something like that. Just filling it in just a slight bit. We just don't want any points to it. And then we can fill in our armhole with the lance curve, French lance curve. Okay. So I'm going to the new armhole position here. And here. Now again, we're always going to check this when we come to the back, that we're truing up the shoulder seams and the armhole. But I'm going to cut it off for now. And what I like to do with the armhole is I like to just tape that to my pattern piece so I don't forget that this is what I cut off. Okay. And the reason why I like to do that is that I want to make sure I'm lining up the back and taking off the same amount in the back. So I'm just going to do a quick tape here to know I cut off that amount. And I often will do that like at the neckline. If I didn't have a shoulder dart to reference here, I would tape that little piece onto here to know how much I took off, so I know when I'm lining up the back that I can line up the two pattern pieces here and here. Okay, and if we've cut it off, we don't know exactly where we did it, but since we have the dart, we know we can go from the dart in this case. But if we didn't have the dart, I would always like do this little quick thing. Okay, so this is done, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this apart now. And I like to mark it. So we have our grain line that we can mark, and we can play around with the grain line on the bias over here if we want. That can give us nice shaping and nice curvature, especially if you're a bigger busted. Playing with a bias in this area can be a great thing. We have our grain line to the front. It's always perpendicular or parallel to the front. I say front, top, princess line, PL for princess line. And I might end up playing with the herringbone of this fabric in the bias, especially if I don't have enough and I need to make it fit in there. So we can reference the original lines more or less. We can also put it back on our sloper and say what was our grain line originally. We can put it here. We can mimic the grain line from here over. So a parallel to this would be my natural grain line, right? But because I might want to play with the bias, I can flip this and I can go from this square to this square would be my true bias of this pattern piece, okay? And it doesn't have to be on the bias, but you might want to play with it. Let's say you have stripes or something, and it's a nice way to get the curvature here because it's an automatic stretch. Side, front, princess line. Okay, yeah. All right, so then we have our midriff here, which I will go ahead and do. I'll go ahead and cut that out. In some cases, I would just wait to do the back at the same time as the front for the midriff, just to check it, but there's not a right and a wrong order here. Okay, I feel like there are a couple comments coming in. Just going to quickly check the comments and give you a quick break from looking at the overhead. Okay, June from London, great to see you. So okay, wonderful. Wonderful that you all are here. Yes, wonderful. You like the slivers as a reminder. This is one thing that I've learned over and over again, and sometimes I never even take them off, just as a reminder there. Okay, wonderful. Someone from India. It's so great to see everyone. Okay, maybe you can add a little bit. Okay, Okay, so glad it's helpful, Cheryl. I'm really happy. Just making sure I didn't miss anyone's comments. It's great to just take a moment to see you all, and we'll go back to the pattern making now. Okay, and I just need a quick glass of water, 1 second. Okay, so what's important on pieces that when you start cutting them, you're like, what is this piece? Oh my goodness. This could be so easy to get this upside down. And guess what? If you get it upside down, the fit will be affected. So anytime we have squares, rectangles, anything like that, we want to start marking the pattern piece before we cut everything apart. We want to have the reference pattern piece nearby so we can make sure what's the top portion, what's the bottom portion. When we're marking the grain line, I always mark the grain line with the arrow pointing down, meaning it's pointing to the bottom of my garment. In production patterns, you're doing it with the arrow going up. That's most typical in production, mass production. But for my brain, I like to think of the arrow pointing to the bottom of the floor. And so I'm going to mimic that here. And I'm going to, again, if you're making production patterns, do whatever your factory does. We don't want to cut it upside down. And especially if it's a print or something like that. Let's say you have a one-way print. Super important. I made one mistake for my sister one year. I was making her pajama pants. And they were M&Ms with all the cute faces and everything, and the little M&M guys. and I cut one leg upside down. All the M&Ms are upside down on one leg. I need to go buy more fabric. Okay, so I just cut that apart and I'm making sure I tape it exactly to the same part. So basically what I've done here is I've taken this and I'm shifting them together like that. I'm eliminating the dart here and I'm continuing the pattern piece so it's nice and contoured like this. You can see we have a point, that's totally normal. And I'm gonna go ahead and grab a little piece of paper, scrap paper for the back. I'm always saving all my scrap paper on the side of my table. If you saw the side of my table right now, it's a mess. But it's so easy to grab it instead of throwing everything on the ground, which I know some people do. And if you know you're not going to use it again, go for it. But I always do these little tiny things to try to save time if I can. Okay, hard to get it exactly where I want it to go. Let's see. Point here, point there, connected and flat. Okay, that's looking nice. And actually, you know what? I want a bigger piece in the back because I want to smooth it out. And we have a couple options for smoothing out those points. We can shave it off or we can fill it in. In this case, I'm going to be shaving off the point and filling it in down here, just because that's looking like the easiest thing to do. And you can see now, all of a sudden our midriff, our yoke, however you want to call it, is taking more shaping. It's going to be more fitted because we've taken that dart out. And so I've shaved off a tiny bit there. I'm going to go ahead and add that tiny bit down here. We never want points unless it's part of the design. That little point is going to give you a difference in fitting. If you imagine the fabric coming up to that little point, you would get a little dimple right there, and that's what we don't want in sewing. And those are the little things that make a home sewn garment either look professional or home sewn. So I want you to always think about the points. And think of it in terms of a puzzle piece. When we put the pattern pieces together, the front to the back, do you want a point on the side seam? Do you want a point at the neckline? Sometimes you do. Like this one, I probably do want a slight point because I'm going to have a ribbon in the back. All right. Okay. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Just checking the chats. Yes, there is going to be a replay. It's going to be the same exact link as the link in your email. So you can always click back at it and watch the rest later if it's getting to be too much. Because I know pattern making is a lot to take in, right? So now we have the lower part, which is the skirt. And you might know that in our moulage, in our sloper, we stop at the low hip line, and then we just need to add to create more. So basically going from a blouse sloper to a dress sloper, super easy. We're just going to add to it and create the entire lower half. Now, since we have this kind of overlay here, we can't do it on the fold, meaning we're going to have a where's left and a where's right. Okay. So that is going to make this a little bit longer to teach this part. I'm going to go ahead and grab more paper. 1 second here. Okay. And even though I just said we're not going to do it on the fold, what we do need to do is we need to have a big piece of pattern making paper that we have on the fold in order to get the left and the right side, because the one side is going to be really long, the other side is going to be really short. Okay. All right, I have to move all this. We're going to start working this direction here. Okay, and that's this is going to become my skirt. As far as length goes, You could do a few different options. Oh, it's not quite wide enough down here. Okay, so I'm going to do the more narrow side right now, which is this side here. And if you remember, it's actually going to be on the other side. It's this side is the side I'm going to focus on, which is the wearer's left side. Wearer's right is over here. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because the paper I've cut out is not quite long enough or wide enough at the bottom. I want it to kind of come out a little bit more over here, kind of like this. Okay, so we're going to do the wearer's left side first. And we have this dart in here. The easiest thing to do is to shift that into a pleat, because that's the design, right? Of course, we can shift that into design lines just like we did the princess seams and everything. I like to go ahead and tape this on here, but since I have to do a wearer's right and a wearer's left, they're asymmetrical. I'm not going to tape it. I'm just going to do a quick drawing of it and align this to my folded part here. I'm going to mark my low hip, mark my high hip if I've got it marked, and I'm going to use my waist shaping. If you know from the slope or the moulage, we have a waist shaping seam in there. This ended up being really close to my original waistline, this mark here. Okay, if I had a notch here, I could just quickly notch this, which I have it notched on my cardboard oak tag. Okay. We're going to eliminate that waist shaping because we have the midriff. If we didn't have the midriff, if we had a waistline or anything, it would be the same exact concept. And we can mark the dart as well. I didn't do that with the notches, but we should go like that and that, at least to get the original one. And then we did increase it, so I guess I can mark the increased amount because it's going to be much tighter at the end. We need to make sure that this piece up here is matching when it's folded to the midriff piece. And I want to take off the waist shaping. So this waist shaping on our pattern, it's really to get a really fitted garment, and it's wonderful to use. It's like the easiest thing once you know how to use it. So I'm going to go to 0 at my dart, just marking my waist shaping. And this becomes my new waistline. So this is basically giving me more contour. It's almost like acting like a dart right here. And then this section here, we're Xing out. Okay, so we're gonna have a really nice shape up here, and it's gonna pull the fabric up a little bit. It's gonna hang very nicely because of it. Then I have my high hip here. I have my deepened dart amount there. And okay, then I can go ahead and true this up. And I want to add a little bit more to my hip because it is a little bit snug on my hips when I'm sitting. And since this is for a dress that I need to move in, I'm going to add a little bit of extra ease in here. And the amount that I add for ease is actually multiplied by 4, remember? So this amount times 4, because we have the side, the front, and the back on both sides. So that's 4 side seams in total. Okay. And I'm doing that probably actually a little bit at the high hip as well. And I can always take that off in the fitting. And that's why I'm like, you know what? I add just a little bit of extra because I don't want it to be too tight. Even a little bit more extra than I've marked is fine. And it's looking really good. Okay. All right. Okay, yes, no worries. I see someone, Susanna. She has to go, no problem. We're gonna be here and there'll be a replay. All right, and I'm so glad that so many of you have joined. It's really, really nice to see you all. Okay, so this is my wearer's right side. My wearer's left side is gonna be the underside actually. The side that I'm marking right now. And I'm gonna go ahead, because I haven't quite figured out the drape of this, how high the drape is going to be when it's just relaxed here. So I'm going to go kind of slightly A-line because it might end up hanging inward this way. So I'd rather have too much over here that I can pin in the fitting because I'm not going to do a fitting sample. I'm going straight to fabric with this one, I think. Haven't decided for sure. Okay. And for the length, I'm going to do a quick test right now. And I'm going to go to measure. Okay. So, where's the measuring tape? So I'm going to just measure myself here and see based on the waist. I would normally put my sloper on, but I know the waist is about here and I know more or less where I want the dress to hang. I'm gonna just do a quick measurement, make sure I'm completely to that point. I don't want it to hit at the thickest part of my calf because that tends to make legs look bigger. I want it to be just kind of below that. So I'm gonna do about there. Oh, it's really long. Okay. You can't see it yet. 1 second. Okay. All right, I think it's gonna be okay. I might end up adding a little bit more length to it. 1 second. Okay. Okay, so it ends up taking up the whole piece of paper. So we could kind of imagine that's gonna A-line out a little bit there. I'm going to use some of this paper up here, and no, that's not enough. Okay. All right, so since this is my wearer's right side and the back side is my wearer's left, and I'm doing this on the wearer's left, I need to flip it over to the other side. But I've done all my markings on this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first cut it out on the fold of the paper. And another thing you can do when you're not sure about the amount of ease, always add more bigger seam allowances and be able to work with those in the fitting. Because even that I say I'm not going to do a fitting sample, I'm still always fitting as I sew and checking it as I go. Okay. So then I know that this is not the same. It's not symmetrical from the right to the left, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to be cutting that part off anyways. It's not totally laying flat down here because it got wet. The roll of paper got wet somehow. Okay. All right, so this is my entire front now. Okay, you can't see the whole thing. It's not really important to see the whole thing because we're going to only be using part of it anyways. Okay, now we're going to add the pleats in there, and we're going to be focusing, if we imagine this side here, we're going to have 2 pleats, plus I want it to fold over for this original fold here. I don't want it to just be a sewn edge there. I want it to almost look like a pleat. So we're gonna mark the pleat, and I want the pleats to be a slight curve, and that's a little bit tricky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, to get a curve. Most of the time it doesn't work to get a curve, but I want to try to get one. So we're going to do just a slight curve, and if we imagine this but mirrored, because I was doing it in front of a mirror and it threw me off. So this part is going to be over here, and we can start drawing, measuring here, and pivoting it to the pattern. Okay, so here we're going to go from the side seam over. Now this is from the seam line, so that means we don't have to account for seam allowance on this pattern because this is already to the seam line. Okay, so 2 inches in, that's 5 centimeters, and then we're at 3 1/4 inches. That's about 7.5 centimeters, I think. Okay, so we're gonna go 2 centimeters in. And then we're gonna go 3 1/4. That's actually about 8 centimeters. Okay, and that's that positioning. And then we have the princess seam, which is the darts here, the deeper darts. And what I'm gonna do here, I forgot to notch it. Sorry if it's really loud. Okay, gonna go ahead and notch this so that it's on the left side as well, the deeper darts. And if you don't have a notcher, you can just cut little triangles, little slits. Okay, I know this is gonna be a long YouTube live, so I understand if it's like too much, too long for you, but I really gotta get this dress done. So I'm gonna hang out here and keep working, and I hope you will too if it works out for you. And we can kind of see the length of the pleats. The length of the pleats are a little bit hard to know whether or not you're gonna get that length. But we can fold the paper and do a little bit of a test. You can also fold the fabric and do a little bit of a test. When I was doing the fabric drape test on my body with folding the pleats, I had to deepen those darts quite a bit to get the kind of look I wanted. Okay, so I've got my outer pleat is a bit shorter, but we have to go always longer than the amount here to get kind of the fold in here. So I'm gonna just do a quick mark here, and then at the 3 1/4 inch in here. Okay, and then I'm gonna have my fold. I'm gonna go ahead and imagine this dart to be shut, which I could close it as well, which I did not mark the finishing here. Okay, oops, the way shaping. Okay. I'm marking the dart here. And technically we're going to be shifting all of this fullness into these pleats, and there are different methods to doing this. You could close this and then open these, which is what I'm going to probably start to do, but the difficulty is like pivoting towards each point. But we're going to go ahead and try that method. There's lots of different methods. We could just ignore the dart up here and start slashing and opening, pivoting, slashing and spreading. Oh, I should mark the dart straight, not curved, because anytime we're slashing and closing a dart, they can't be curved. And then we're gonna pivot, so we can pivot towards each of those points, which is not going to be ideal once we're starting to cut this. Okay, so I'm cutting on one dart. And I mean, there are so many ways of dart manipulation. I have seen everything, really. And this would be kind of one way, I would say would be an option. And then we're closing this dart and basically shifting the depth into that pleat. We're going to have to adjust the waistline, of course. Okay, so that just shifted the dart into that pleat, and we closed this dart. We could do another pivot point to this one and distribute it, or you could pivot from this one to this one and distribute it kind of evenly between the two. But I know I need a deep, deep dart or deep, deep pleat for this to look how I want it to look. So I can close this, close this. Now we're gonna fix that gap later. And then we can slash this open, and we can kind of go to wherever we want it down at the bottom. And we could even slash this even again and open it up deeper if we want it to go deeper. So if I measure this now, I'm at 1.5. And if I imagine this fabric, this is 1.5. In total. So that's not a very deep dart or pleat, but it is a nice one. I think I want it a little bit deeper for the bigger one. I would like it to be something like that. And you can always do this kind of test on yourself to see, okay, how deep do I need to make it? And I think that's really deep. That's 3 inches in total. Okay, so we're definitely going to want to deepen that up about twice as much. The other one, I don't want it to be as long as this one, so we can make it a little bit less deep. And the thing is even if we're not getting the depth exact, we can always adjust that in the fitting when we're sewing it. Okay, so I'm going to say this is more or less where I want it to end, but of course when we're wearing it, we don't have a choice sometimes of where it ends. And I'm going to continue this down in the direction where I want it to end. Okay, or where I want it to fold. And it's, we're not going to hopefully get the fold going all the way down, but we have to do this in the pattern manipulation process to get the fullness that we need. Okay, and this one as well. I'm going to kind of follow the curve down to go this direction. Okay. All right, let's keep going. We are having so much fun. Pattern making party. Okay, we make a pivot point at the bottom of our pleat, and this is the tricky part. Okay, actually with pleats, we don't always do a pivot point. I would go ahead and do, so a pivot point would be like we're closing the bottom and we're opening the top, right? So we would do a pivot point and cut up this way, leave a little bit uncut, and open this up, and this would close the bottom section. But we don't necessarily need to do a pivot point with a pleat because it's not going to really have an end point like a dart would have. So we can literally cut it all the way down. And I think a lot of people would just stop cutting at the side, but I really want to have a directional pleat not going to the side seam. So that's why I'm cutting all the way down, because wherever you end up slashing and spreading is where your direction of the pleat is going. So even though it's kind of silly to make it go all the way down, it's going to be such a tiny amount down there. We want to have, I would say, let's say 2 inches of a pleat here. And we'll go for the 3 inches here. And I have all this scrap paper. We're not going to worry about seam allowances until the very, very end. That's when we add the seam allowances. So just ignore the seam allowance topic. And let me make sure this is even wide enough. It's pretty close. Not quite 2 inches. Well, just at 2 inches. So let's see. I like to get one side taped all the way down before I tape the other side down. When they get to be so long, it gets a little bit challenging. Okay. Really make sure it's lying as flat as possible. Okay. Some of it's the water damage on the paper at the bottom. I have just a couple inches of water damage, but for the bottom of the garment, it doesn't matter so much. Okay, I need a quick drink of water. Okay, we're gonna do the same exact thing for this pleat over here. And actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut off the extra that we don't need so much here. I'm gonna imagine, okay, so we have one pleat here. What's gonna happen is it's gonna get folded this way, and we can imagine how that's gonna look. A little bit with paper, not so great, but you can see we're gonna get a nice fold there with fabric, much better than paper. And that's what that part's gonna look like. Then we're gonna have another much deeper one here to hopefully elongate the pleat. Then from there, we're going to have our princess seam, hopefully coming up right here is the fold of the next one. So if we imagine, where's our sketch? We're gonna have this folded under. So I'm still marking to my fold line, and then I'll add seam allowance later for the fold. So it's gonna look something. And I wanna check this overlay position. I don't want it to be too high. So I'm gonna quickly measure myself here. And you could do it with bendable tape measure from the waist line, more or less. And you can always put the sloper on to get the exact waist position. And the overlap. Okay. And you can always adjust that overlap in the fitting for the curves, the amount, so it's better to go safe than sorry for length. And this is going to be about here. So I'm going down more or less straight and then kind of slowly curving it down. Okay. And then the other side is going to look something like that, hopefully. So kind of nice to just imagine it, something like that. Okay. And you can't see because I switched the cameras. Okay. So this is going to be my overlap here. I'll just go straight down from there. Okay. All right. And then the other side is going to come somewhere around there. Okay. All right. And you know what I should have actually done before I did this? I really should have mimicked my seam over here on the outside. I should have done that because I could just use that as a starting point. Okay, so I'm going to quickly do that. I should have just gotten the bigger piece of paper from the beginning, but I was thinking I would just trace another one for the other front, but it's going to be easier if we do it here. And we're going to quickly fold this over. And this is my scrap paper in the back. I know this is hard to see on the camera, so that's also why I'm talking so much, to try to explain what's going on here with white paper. Okay, so I am going to mark my finish for this line here, and I'm going to mark this, and I already did my hip up until this area here on this side, and I'm going to then use this line and do a straight line to get my right, where's right side. Because if I had the sloper going all the way down, it would be no issue to trace another pattern quickly and go with that. But since I've already done the work of making this position of where I want it to go, might as well just utilize this pattern piece. Okay. And I can always change that curve. That's why I'm adding a little bit more curve to it than I want right now. Just because maybe I might want to raise that line a little bit. You know, we can't lower it in the fitting, but I can always do like a 1 inch, 2.5 centimeter seam allowance that I have more room to play with the length. Okay, so that's looking great. I'm going to go ahead and cut this apart so it's a little bit easier to see the where is right and where is left. Okay, and we'll cut the length as well. Even though it's, you know, not 100% final, I can put it on the dress form after this. and do a quick check. Do I like that shape? Does it look right to me? Is that what I was envisioning? I can put it up against my body and check it. And I always recommend doing that whenever you're making patterns from scratch for any style lines. And that's what I love about this design tape too. It's like you get such a great starting point and you know it's going to be pretty close to what you want. But shapes of the hems or things like that can actually be a little bit tricky to identify what you want unless you, and you can see I'm even cutting a little bit off. Okay, that's okay. All right. Okay, so this is looking really nice to me. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this apart all the way up. And before I do that, I'm gonna quickly mark my grain lines. Okay, I wanna go parallel to the center front for my grain line. Of course, you can always play with grain lines on skirts, especially the bias can be beautiful draping. And I'm gonna mark parallel to this one, that grain line, this grain line over here, so just so that we're matching. And you know what, with this fabric, since there are so many little holes in it, I'm really gonna have to play around with those grain lines probably. But you can see that that is a slight difference between this line here, which is okay. We don't have to have this design line here mimic the grain line. It can, or you don't have to. Or if I want to visually, I could line up this as my grain line and it would not throw off the fit at all. So it kind of depends on how it looks when I'm cutting it on the fabric and how much I have, if it works okay and all that. So what do we have going on here? What we had before was, I'm keeping this little jog here because, and there's a piece of extra scrap paper in the back. Okay, I'm keeping that jog because when I pivoted this dart shut, it gave me this jog here because we overlapped this area here to pivot this into the pleat. But I need to correct that, and I want to keep that there so I don't forget to correct that. After I get my pleats all in there, I'm going to fold it, and then I'm going to do a full truing of those things. Okay, so I'm going to put away the Where's Right for now, and we're going to finish up the Where's Left. Okay. Okay, draping is fun. I can see Dorian and Doriana, I think, said that. And Anne, you're more than welcome. I'm glad you guys are all joining for this. So glad. How is everyone doing? How are your summers? We are ending the summer here in Switzerland. It's definitely getting colder. Rain has really been prolific this summer. We had about 3 weeks of rain and everything's beautifully green. So the plants loved it. But I have to say it did eat into my summer. Okay, so we've got the next pleat ready to go. We've got the scrap paper. We already had quite a bit of depth from the dart there. And here we're gonna do the 3 inches or however deep you want. 3 might end up being too much, but I'd rather have a little extra to play with. Okay, and whenever we're getting all these scraps in here, I like to pull out colored pencils and grab those colored pencils. So I know that's one pleat. And then I will mark the other one. A different color. And then I can really remember, okay, it's not from here to here, it's from here to here, and it's from here to here. And that little arrow, meaning I'm folding that direction, I'm going that way. If I was folding this way, I would go the other direction. And otherwise, it can be really hard when you're coming later to cutting if you don't have that marked on there. Okay, so we're going to start actually from the bottom and kind of work our way up, make sure it's nice and flat, pivoted outward nicely, and then we're going to tape from the top. Okay. I'm going to just write a note for myself. Add a 1-inch fold. Just so I don't forget that in my seam allowance. Okay, so that's looking great. I'm going to do the truing of the waistline at the very end here, once we get the other side done. Okay. Then we are going to start with the where's left, which are the kind of more diagonal or horizontal looking lines. And again, I want to have a slight curve to them, so we're going to try to get those curves in there the best we can. It is a little bit tricky. Different methods could do different things as far as closing this dart up and opening them to become pleats. So we're gonna, I haven't even decided yet how I'm gonna do it. Okay, that's my sloper dart. And here, I had started with the 3, or I started with 5 and it looked really busy, but I think it was because of all the design lines, the dark tape. When I have this here, it looks really, really nice. And also the original design had 5 as well. What I do know is the third one down, I want it to be the deepest, probably. And then maybe have two more smaller at the bottom is what I'm thinking, but maybe a little closer together. So I'm going to start drawing on the pattern and see how busy it looks on the pattern. And if I decide I get through this part and I'm like, oh, I really don't like this many pleats, guess what? You can always adjust this in the fitting, which it doesn't seem like you should be able to, but since it's in the length and we have extra, we can always open these up and take it off of the top portion if we want. So I'd rather have too much than too little, always. And I'm going to take this and place it here. Instead of measuring each thing, this is like my quick little Okay, we're actually going that way. Okay, just to get a quick reference. And I want to measure each one to see what the difference is here and here. And I want it to be somewhat consistent. So that's 1 3/8. We'll move that one here. And then I'm going to add 2 more. 1 3/8 and 1 3/8. Now, if I didn't want them to be all symmetrical, that's totally up to the design. And then we have different options here, right? So we can mark those curves in. We can see over here, this was all the way to the other dart, which was over here somewhere. I'm just referencing this on top, and I'm looking to see kind of where they're heading over here, right? Instead of measuring. If I wanted to, I could measure down each position from the waistline, right? And just kind of eyeing it, something like that. So it's going from here to here, okay? Okay, and so this one I would say one of the third one is definitely beyond the dart over here, so that would be this one over here. Okay, and I'm just doing a quick measure of garment to pattern, and that's what I often do with that design tape. I'm not like physically measuring everything. After a while you'll kind of get the hang of it. Okay, so this is going to give us a jog once we close that dart, but that's okay. That's my, oh, that's my second one. Wait, is that, no, that's, okay, that's the third one. Okay, more or less that's kind of where we're going. And you know, each line doesn't have to be the same. You're the designer. You can choose all this stuff, what you're liking. And maybe I go a little bit further down with this one and even further down with this one. Something like that. Okay. All right, so we have a few different options with darts. We can always think of this as a pivot point to close it. So from that pivot point, we can go to any other point. Let's say this wanted to be a dart instead of a pleat. Either a dart or a pleat, you can draw a line connecting from this point to this point, connecting this point to this point, and all of them really. The difficulty is when it's coming over the dart here to get some of these to open up correctly. It can be a little tricky. So what I'm gonna do is, since I know I need to have deep pleats anyways, this amount, pivoting it into one of these is probably gonna be enough. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a line there, and I could also do it to that one if I want. I'm not going to. We're going to see how deep this one ends up getting. So let's go ahead and do a pivot. Slash and close the dart. And we're going to do a pivot up to there. So we're going to go here on our pleat. And pivot and stop right before that dart. And then watch this. We are closing the dart and we're automatically adding depth to a pleat over here. We're shifting the fitting area into that section. Now, at the end, we can shift that amount into multiple areas, or we could just do it into one. Technically, if it's getting to be too deep, you want to kind of shift it into multiple areas. But since we're already getting nice shaping through the rest of the pleats, I think it's going to be fine if we shift it all into one. Okay, and then if we wanted to at this point, we could shift this one to over here or over there again. So I'll just show you what that would look like if you are trying to pivot darts around. This is how you're kind of playing around with the shapes here. So you can see how we're getting different amounts there, and that actually looks really nice. And we could kind of keep doing that to this just to distribute it evenly if we wanted. There, like I said, there's not always a right and a wrong with pattern manipulation. Well, I should correct that. There is a wrong sometimes, in my opinion, but there are many methods that work. We'll just say it like that. And you can see like we're shifting some of the positioning over here into fullness there as well. So we have to account for that maybe we don't need as much over here. So we're always kind of thinking, okay, if we're getting things bigger in some areas, but we maybe don't want it, then we have to take it off over here. But that can always be checked in the fitting. And we just kind of keep doing that same process. This time I would go ahead and probably tape this. I think this is good enough distributing that dart into multiple areas just to be on the safe side, since we have those pleat options there. But at this point, we would make sure that this is taped down, and then we would cut another pivot point to there and slash it open, and so on. Okay, now we're gonna keep slashing and spreading to add the actual depth that we need. And when I was doing the test, we definitely needed a lot. I always do the test with pleats in the direction that it's gonna be hanging. So checking to see how is that looking to me, how deep is that, because the grain line does affect the way it hangs. So that's about 1.5 inches deep, 1.5 inches on the half. So that's 3 total. And that's gonna give us a pretty deep one. I would say we wanna be somewhere around there for the deeper, longer ones. And we don't want to go too shallow, because if we go too shallow, it's going to open up right away. And we don't want it to open up on the pooch of the tummy, on the little curvature, the beautiful curvature of the tummy that we love so much. We want to have it to kind of hug the tummy a bit more. And that's why I would prefer going deeper than too shallow, especially for horizontal pleats. Okay, water 1 second. Okay, so I know it's getting very late. For me, it's almost 9 p.m. And if you are still there, thanks for sticking around with me. And if you are not, and you're watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay. Okay. So we're going to be using another piece of scrap paper in the back, and this one we're going to be doing the same exact method. So I like to continue this all the way down in the direction that I want that pleat to go, and it's going to be going to here. This one is going to be going here. And I will just mark the little lines of more or less where I want them to end. But of course, we're going to have to play with that in the fitting if some are too deep and others are not. And that's the depth is what we're playing with mostly in the fitting and the positioning. Okay. So we want small, medium, large, medium, or small, medium. Okay, so I'm just going to write M, S, L, M, S. So in relation to the depth, we need to make sure that this one, this long one, is the deepest in order to get this effect all the way to here. And so this one I would say would be my 3 inches, which 3 inches in centimeters is 7.5 centimeters. And then I would say the medium could be 2.5. And this one could be 2. Okay, so 2.5 inches is about 6 centimeters, and then 2 inches is about 5 centimeters. Depth, total depth. Okay. All right, so we're gonna do some pivot points, and I'm gonna stop cutting right before the edge of this pattern. I see Bobby just joined us from Oregon. Thanks for joining. Okay. This is going to look a little bit strange, but stick with me here. We're going to get, I'm going to grab a little piece of paper. Okay. And the top one. This came off here. All right, so we're going to start with the kind of imagining this pivoting out here. Okay, we need to make sure that gets taped shut here. All right, and we can see this is the pivoting of our pattern and how it starts to look when we're opening it up. And I need to make sure the piece of paper underneath is big enough. And I mean, even if you're working with scrap paper, you know, sometimes I'm just trying to save paper and it's easier, but when you have so many cuts, it is easier to have one big piece of paper behind it. Okay, so we no longer see where that dart shifted to anymore, right? The dart was between the lower 3, but now since we're adjusting everywhere, it actually doesn't really matter for this kind of example of what I just did about pivoting the dart into multiple sections. It can really give you a different fit if you're not adding additional fullness. But what I know, because I did close that dart and shift it over, I know that even with these closed, these pleats that I'm adding, I'm going to get a really nice fit because I did close that dart to begin with. Yeah, it's still closed. Okay. So the top dart, small, medium, large, small, medium. So I want 2.5 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches, 2.5, 2 over here. And we're going to kind of be pivoting it open until we get that amount that we want. I'm going to try to, okay. All right, so I'm going to start by taping the lower section down first. Just making sure. And something like that. And then we're going to go 2.5 here for the depth from this point to this point. Those are just little pattern weights. 2.5. All right, that's looking really good. And again, with the colors, I'm going to be, if I was going upward against gravity, I would point the arrow this way. I'm going with gravity to the bottom of my skirt. So I'm folding this direction. And I want to mark this and mark this. And I'm gonna go every other color so I don't get mixed up in the sewing process later. I want this one to be about 2 inches. Okay. All right, now you can see we're going to have a big jog between these, meaning they're not going to line up between this kind of back fabric or piece of paper, and we're going to have to realign it to make sure it's good. And with a pattern piece like this, if I'm not sure about those dart or those pleat depths, and I'm still kind of testing it out in my sample, because every fabric's going to hang differently. Let's say you do a fitting sample in a muslin fabric, or in the UK they call it a calico. That fabric's not going to hang the same as your original fabric, and that's part of the reason why I'm skipping a fitting sample, because I know it's going to fit. It's using my GRD method sloper from my moulage. So the fitting is not the issue here. The issue is going to be, do I like the design aesthetic? Okay, I want 2.5 inches there, about 6.5 centimeters or so. And that's something you're not going to know if you're using a muslin or calico from the UK, that type of fabric, because it's not going to hang the same way. It's not going to fold the same way. It's not going to bell out at the bottom the same way, or fold in at the bottom the same way, until you get it in the actual fabric. And so something like this, I'm going to be adding even like 2 to 3 inches over here on this side and over here. Anytime I have like this much of a adjustment going on, when we see we're flaring it out by the slash and spread, we add a lot more seam allowance to the garment, and then we can play a little bit more, or we can play a little bit more on the dress form before we actually get to sewing it. So we cut it out, and then we start folding, pinning, and then doing a test, and then we see, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. Then I can cut it down to even 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters of seam allowance. But I would even, like this whole section all the way around here where I'm not sure about the design aesthetic, give ample seam allowance, and then you're going to be okay in the fitting. And I even notch down my seam allowances. So let's say the bottom, I'm not as concerned about the bottom. Then I can do a notch and then go down to my smaller seam allowance in the lower section. That way I know clearly from one huge seam allowance to the smaller seam allowance where that ends up being. Okay. All right, so that's looking fantastic. I'm gonna mark these here. All right, and so that is officially this lower pattern piece. Now the next step would be to close all of these pleats up, true the pattern, which we can go ahead and do. Okay. And since I have such a big piece of paper back here, I could use this already for my seam allowances, so I'm not going to cut this down over here yet. I'll just wait till I add my seam allowances and then get to that. Okay, so we're going to start to fold the paper, which is not easy to do. And I'm going to make sure I have ample tape so that it's not lifting up anywhere. Oh, it's going to lift up, but we try to reduce the amount and make sure along the fold areas, so every pleat has lots of tape. Okay. And this is the part that's the hardest, because the way this fabric is going to sit and get folded is going to mimic the shape of the pleat. So we want to really make sure that we're folding the paper in the correct way. And we're getting the pleat. And so sometimes it might be that your original line doesn't match up with the original line over here. I know it's really hard for you to see. There's a bit of a jog there, but you can see it depends. If I force it, it's gonna kind of force the fabric to be more over here. But if I want it to open up a little bit and I don't want it to be so long, I can actually let it go a little bit more here. So we can kind of play with the length of the pleat by seeing, okay, how is this folding back here? How much do I push it to make it fit, or do I let it go? And that's one of the things that you can also play around in the fitting. Forcing it to line up or allowing it to let it lay where it wants to lay, and then it hopefully is going to be opening up somewhere over here, even though it's not on the paper. So we would end up doing this for every single pleat, folding it, and then we would use our tracing wheel, pointed, and we would mark our new line here. And it might be that we're adding a little bit to this one and taking off a little bit, but we're mirroring or mimicking a nice smooth line all the way down, basically. And then we add our, we're making sure we get it all the way up here to the fold that's underneath there. And that's giving us our shape for underneath. Okay, we're heading up on 2 hours long. I knew this was going to be a long one. All right, okay. And another thing that's going to be affecting the shape of the fold really is the fold behind this area. So playing around with that movement in your fitting is going to really give you a different look. Whether it's kind of curving a bit or not, I'm gonna take this apart and explain it a little bit better. So if you imagine we're using that pointed tracing wheel to get a nice continued line, I'd normally not use this until I'm done with everything, but I wanna just explain this because I feel like my voice is running low and I don't know if I'm gonna get through this whole thing today if we go through all of this. So you can see here, I accidentally missed the tracing wheel a bit there. I'm going to make sure I get the tracing wheel all the way to that fold underneath. So now you maybe can't see, but I'm going to mark it with markers so you can see. And it's this green. So this is kind of looking like a fan, like a paper fan. Now, if I, in the fitting, end up pulling the fabric a little bit here, when it's folded underneath, let's say I'm literally pulling the fabric, I'm gonna get a different direction of my pleat. It might curve more, and this is the part you can play with a lot in the fitting if the direction of the pleats aren't going where I want it to go. And that's why I allow a lot of extra fabric over here to play around with those pleat directions. But we do that same thing all the way down. This becomes my new side seam, which looks super funky, right? It looks super strange. Don't worry about the strange, weird thing, because as soon as these pleats are shut, it's going to be nice and closed in. It's going to look beautiful. Okay. After you've added the pleats, where is the grain line? That is a great question because you can see our grain is way over here. So the best thing for pleats tends to be on the bias because the bias drapes beautifully. The bias is the diagonal of the fabric. So from here to here, this is the bias. So the 45-degree angle. And if we imagine whenever we're having pleats on the bias, it just hangs so much nicer. You can see it's like it was made for pleats on the bias. So I would prefer whenever having pleats or tucks or things like that, if the pattern piece is looking super strange, take the main grain line from the lower section, which would be this one, let this one flare out on the bias and it's going to look beautiful. And that way this is aligned here with the other pattern piece, the left side. And once this all gets folded, it's going to lay very nicely. Okay. That is the concept for the front. I'm not going to go through the rest because I'm losing my voice and I need some more water quickly. Are there any other questions? Oh, Tisha's asking, how long have I lived in Switzerland? I've been here for 11 years and I came here for my job originally. I was working for a pattern making or company called Odlo. They make a lot of sports clothing for cycling, cross country, what else? Hiking, skiing, all sorts of things, running, and that kind of thing. And I came here for that job, leading a team of pattern makers and developers. And I did that for 7 years. And then I went on to do my own business. So I started the business a long time ago, Gina Renee, and now teaching pattern making courses, and I absolutely love it. So, okay, we're gonna keep going here, and then when I have a little time, I'll keep telling you about my journey, if there is time. Okay, so we can see this is the left side, and we would do the same exact concept for this. We're folding that shut from one side to the other. You can see we're getting a little bit of extra here. That's fine. We can just cut that off. And then afterwards, once this is all folded, we have only 2 pleats on this side. Over here and here. It's not looking beautiful on paper, but it will on the fabric. And we can see that's giving us a big pooch right here right now. So it could be that the 3-inch might be too much for the vertical pleat, but I'd rather have too much and take it out if I don't need it. And then what I would do is I would add a piece of scrap paper here to here and smooth this whole thing out. I would have to add back to that jog when we close the dart and smooth it out to the side here. I would make sure that this measurement is lining up with this measurement here of my princess seamed pattern. It doesn't have to be the same shape. We don't want the same shape here, but the measurement has to be the same measurement here as it is on here. And I would tend to just fill this whole thing in to 0 right here and use my tracing wheel to get those little jogs of the pleats exactly as we want them. Okay, so that's the front. The front is done. Are there questions about the front? Doria, yeah, I know this is my friend in Germany. I really loved living in Germany too. It's great to see. Oh, so glad you're enjoying this, Susan. Okay. We are doing so much work here. Susan, you are fantastic. Actually, all of you are. It's amazing to see you all. Laura, you are super, super talented. Susan, everyone. I love seeing everybody's garments, everything that you've made from the courses. It's beautiful. Okay, so we would then mark where's left here, where's right on the other one. Make sure you're doing all your markings. I'm gonna not do it to save time at the moment. And then I'm gonna jump to the back. Okay, so the back pieces, I have my shoulder here, and I'm gonna match that over here. Yeah. Okay. All right. And I'm just matching this stuff up because it's the easiest way, right? Like I could go back to the sloper and I could measure everything out. I kind of got my idea for my back length for the V-neck. I want to have a nice kind of rounded V-neck here, and I want to make sure I'm clearing the bra line once again. So my bra line tends to be below the armhole just a bit, and the band tends to be here. I want to make sure I'm clearing that over. So I'm going to go directly from the armhole, and I'm going to raise it just a slight bit to make sure I'm sure to clear it. But of course, this should already be clearing it over here. We don't want the bra to be showing there. So we know that this is definitely going to be safe, in the safe zone. And we can go ahead and use this to true. I'm okay if it comes to a slight V here because I'm going to be doing that ribbon. Generally, we would actually, I can just take a little bit of that V off just to be sure. It's going to make it easier for sewing if it's not coming to a point. And then here, we're going to mark this there. That's looking really nice. We want to make sure this is nice and flat here. Okay, then I'm going to take this amount here that I took off, that 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to take it off here. And if you remember in my fitting, let me pull it open quickly. Okay. If you remember in my fitting here, I had a little bit of extra here. This is because I can use this sloper with some sleeves. I have a sleeve that has extra ease on it so that I can get more of the ease on the sleeve instead of on the body. And that's also why we have extra back here, because we do need to have some movement when we do have a sleeve. So we have to accept that. Okay. So I want to definitely not have that because this is having no sleeves on this dress. So I want to make sure I'm deleting that extra here, which is probably going to be coming in quite a bit in this area. And the amount it will come in is also up to the design. So we can see I could really have it scooped out quite a bit back here. And you can see that this plus this is actually a pretty wide back for a dress. And we're going to shift this dart probably into a princess seam over here. So what I'm thinking of is something like this. And I'm having a really nice deep area here because of how much excess was there. Now the proper way to do this would have been to pin it back here. I did not take it off and repin it because I don't have a zipper in this, so it's a lot of work getting all those pins in there, and I had to get help with the pinning. Okay, but we can see like this depth back here is a very reasonable depth for the back of a dress, and we can kind of imagine it like, okay, the dart is here. So it would be really still coming out to the armhole pretty closely. And I could even take off even a little bit more right here if I wanted. And I could play around with my seam allowance and add extra seam allowance just to make sure I like that curve in the fitting. Okay. All right. And I'm just to save time, I like to have that front pattern piece cut out so that I can true the lines easily. Just save a little time. And when you're using the French curve, you don't have to use it in one swipe. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't get the curves right. Just keep shifting it until you get the curves right. And let's get the front on there so we're sure to get, we're imagining this shut here. And we're actually getting a slight bit of a point there. So I am actually going to take off a tiny bit here because of this gaping right there from the sleeve ease. And this is also what I want to just shave off a tiny bit here to basically reduce this amount here just a tiny bit, because I want this to be nice and fitted. So I'm going to cut this a little bit off. And it's going to go to the new side seam there. And that's a nice continuation. We don't want any point right there. All right. Oh, I just realized that my computer is not plugged in. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Okay, in the end, so glad you're enjoying this. Okay, this is fantastic, and thanks for taking the time to show this. In the end, when you're walking and truing the pattern pieces, would you have the pleated pieces folded while truing? Yes, absolutely. You have all of those pleated parts folded. I don't know when that question came in, if you saw me folding the pleats or not already, but yes, you want to have all of those pleats folded. Okay, now we're going to shift this dart into a princess seam, and I want to mimic something more like this princess seam to the back. I don't want the princess seam to be going this way. So I want it to kind of come here like that. I want to continue this as a nice curve there, and I'm probably going to change the curve just slightly, just visually. That's not going to affect the fit so much. It will actually give it a little bit more shaping right there. If I felt like it was going to affect the fit, I would add it to this side. So I take it here, take it off, because this is going to be this pattern piece here. And again, whenever we're doing closing darts, we're pivoting up to the one that we're closing, or pivoting down to the new area. So this is what we can do this way. We can close this, pivoting all the way down there, and then going this way. So this one is not fully trued up here, this sloper. Okay, so you can see we're eliminating a little bit back here because it's folding over. I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's okay. The other option is that you can go to here and then you can pivot up to this and then just close this position. It doesn't give it a very different shape though. So I don't know if that made any sense. Probably not a ton. Okay, so then we've closed this dart. And we've then taken out quite a bit here. Now the thing is that this is not so much shaping right here. And since I did have a little bit of extra here, I might end up shaving off even a little bit more in my fitting to pull this part into the princess seam. So more than likely what I'm going to end up doing in the fitting is taking a little bit more off of each, but I'll keep it there for now. It's not hurting anything. And then I'm going to cut apart this one. Oh, and I didn't draw my midriff. Okay, so I want to make sure that midriff is matching in the position. So I'm going to mark it here. And I'm marking it here. Okay. And we're gonna go ahead and check that side seam. I should have written side seam. This is what you should not be doing. Center, front, and side seam. When I started talking about the weird pattern pieces, usually you mark them right away. As soon as you're cutting them out and you're like, this is a rectangle, this is a square, a red flag needs to go off, side seam. You could write princess line, even though you're not cutting it, then you know. You can say this is the bottom, this is the top, bottom. I mean, I know that because I marked the arrow, but this is really the important stuff. And I know that this is the right shape because I've done a lot of midriffs before. So we can see if these were sewn together, are we going to get a nice contoured line back here? And no V, that's what I'm looking for. And I would probably just go straight across in the back instead of going with a slight contour. It's gonna already get a little bit contoured because of this dart closing. Okay, so we have the 2 inches there, and I'm gonna go directly to the waistline here, 2 inches, and straight across. All right, is anyone still watching? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. Are you enjoying it? It's a long process, isn't it? To me, like, the time just goes by so fast. I would even go ahead and put this on here so I know in the future that that's what I did to it. If I want to make a nice fitted garment again with the sloper, I can remember that. And I'm going to go ahead and put this one on there just so that I know that's what I did. Okay. I want to definitely true that up there. Need that a little bit deeper, a little bit wider there. Okay, and all right, people are still here enjoying it. So glad. Oh, and you took a pattern making course this year. That's wonderful. Elizabetta, you're still watching. Wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna take the middle point between here. We're gonna match this point to this point and just draw a straight line. That's truing the shoulder, but really the sloper should be true. Some of these slopers, I don't true those parts because I'm always changing the shoulder and the armhole anyways. And then you end up with a jog on your sloper. Sometimes I end up having to cut them off because they get so wrinkled after too much use. But really the oak tag, the cardboard sloper should be trued already. Okay, so this is my back upper section. Parallel to center back. Upper. And center back. Now on a fitted dress like this, I could definitely use my back waist shaping. So my back waist shaping has the curve on the moulage like this, and I could definitely do that, but I fit this on me and I didn't need to do it. It was fitting so well as it was. And I have a deeper waist shaping here, which we're going to tackle the back waist shaping soon, and I'm so excited to show you this. So the waist shaping on a moulage and a sloper is this section here. And this is the part where people get a little bit confused about this waist shaping. And if we imagine it, it's similar to a dart, basically. We don't call it a dart, but it's similar to the concept of it. And we're always trying to eliminate darts eliminate waist shaping in any way that we can. So what can we do in the back here to get rid of this waist shaping? Because we haven't folded it out, we haven't slashed it out yet. What are other options? We have this piece here, which is the midriff. It's before we're creating the midriff, this one. And what we can do is we can measure this amount here, because if we look at the back, the waist shaping, okay, on my garments, I like to pin the waist shaping here. So we've pinned it. And I like to have my sloper like this because you can always unpin it and play around with the waist shaping, raising it up, folding it out parallel all the way around. And I go through that in the online course in the sloper section. So if you haven't watched the sloper section in a while, you should go back and watch it because I've added a few bonus videos to that. And I explain waist shaping a lot better in there. Okay, so we have the midriff and we can put that waist shaping into the midriff lines here. I know this is not so big for you to see. Okay, so we want to eliminate this amount and we can put it into the midriff. We're going to measure the depth that we have. However much we have, we're going to take half of it and split it between the two lines. Okay, so we have the upper section as well here. And we can do two ways, or many ways actually, probably. We can take it off of the bottom section here and kind of vary it over to half the amount here. So we're taking half here, putting it here, half here, putting it here. Or we can split that half of this into the upper and the lower section of the lines. So I have a 1/2 inch, which is about just over 1 centimeter. So if we take 1/4 inch from the bottom, 1/4 inch from the top, which is about 1/2 centimeter each, and then we measure this over here, and we want to take off half of that amount but split between the upper and the lower sections. We're going to do a new line from there to there, and then we're going to kind of redraw this lower section as well. Okay, so I should have done that before I cut that piece apart. All right. Oh, wonderful. Somebody is there working on their moulage, Brandy. That's wonderful. We're doing a sewing party, sewing pattern making party together. Love that. And someone just found me on Tuesday on YouTube. Wonderful. You signed up for the mini course. You have an interesting challenge. You're part of a living history group and hoping to figure out that to use those patterns. I think you sent me an email too. I think I remember reading that. Wonderful. So yeah, there is so many people doing historical costuming. It's really inspiring to see that stuff. It's super intricate clothing and the design is so fascinating, right? Okay, so I've just put half of that amount into there, which actually the curve made it be a little bit more than half here. Yeah, just a slight bit. So on the lower section, I need to watch out for that because I don't want to end up taking too much. So this becomes half of my waist shaping here. And we're going to just cut that off like it doesn't exist. Cut off the top line, cut off the bottom line. Now, since we have that waistline, I'm going to use a different color here. And use this one. Okay. And for here, we still want this midriff to be 2 inches. So we can mark down the 2 inches, but if we take off a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom, we would want to consider that in our measurement. Instead, I'm going to take the rest of it off from the bottom for this one. And the reason why is because the dress will kind of get pulled up from the lower section only, and it will get a nice fit still. So I'm going to mark from this lower line my midriff. Okay. And yeah, so that's going to get slightly curved to that line. All right. Yeah, you are the one who emails me. Okay. All right. It's wonderful you've eliminated darts before, but still the fit is a struggle sometimes. But you know what? If you start with a sloper and a moulage that you know fit, that's already makes such a huge difference. Okay, I'm not going to tape that waist shaping on because this is kind of my standard procedure. So I know that that's kind of normal for me. Now we're cutting off the dart on the lower or on the upper section, and we're cutting off the waist shaping that we just did. There, I'm gonna take this off. Okay, so I'm going to just mark the grain line because I forgot to do that from the beginning, which usually I do that on each kind of quadrant of piece when I know I'm going to be making princess seams or cutting things apart. That's going to be my original grain line, but I could throw that on the bias if I want. Bias ? Okay, then we've eliminated the dart. We don't have a nice line here though. We're going to have to correct that to make sure this is going together nicely, because right now we're going to have a really ugly point there. Usually to draw this line, you could take from the middle and then you can give and take and make that a different adjustment there, but it's hard to explain. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start. Let me see here. Marking. I can go ahead and do this. Okay, and we'll do this one. This is going to be adjusting the grain line actually because we're taping those together, so I don't have to treat that as a separate quadrant, but I am going to mark side seam, princess line, center back. Okay, so this is going to be my midriff here, and I'm cutting off the waist shaping off the top portion. And really you could put all of that waist shaping in the lower seam just like you have it here. You wouldn't have to do it between the two. It's really up to you if you do. And this will give it like a kind of a slight dip in the back. So if you don't want that, you don't have to do that. We're gonna slash and close or just fold the dart shut and tape that dart shut. That's going to be our midriff, and we're going to make sure we're Xing out this here because this was my original waist shaping. Say top, bottom. Okay, and then we have the other half of the waist shaping, which was only 1/2 inch, just slightly over 1 centimeter, and then we have just half of this amount here. And that's going to become our new waist shaping line. Okay, and we're going to X this out here, here, here. All right, I would then mimic the same concept for the skirt part. I would be adding a bit here just to make sure I have enough ease, and I would turn this into a princess seam by going all the way down, cutting this into one piece and cutting this into another piece. So 2 quadrants again. And we can go ahead and mark those grain lines and always going perpendicular on the other quadrant. Okay. All right, so then I'm going to take off this waist shaping here. So that waist shaping is totally eliminated now. And we're gonna X out the dart. We're gonna cut it out like that. Center back, side seam. All right, so that is essentially my pattern. I'm not gonna keep going and do the skirt. It's the same concept as we did for the front. I have to do it on my own another day and then add all the seam allowances still. But that is the concept. Are there any questions? Okay, someone is saying, not sure why you wouldn't just use the waist shaping as it is and take the full amount. You definitely can do that. So there's not a right or a wrong with the waist shaping. If I didn't want this midriff to have like a slight curve to it, so you can see when I cut it out, I still have to true that up and make sure it's nice and contoured. But you can see it's given it like a different shape to it. So there's not really a right or a wrong with the waist shaping. I would say there is so many different options with it. And that's why I love it, because just like with tons of darts, we can shift them around, move them, create new design lines and that kind of thing. So I hope that makes sense. Are there any other questions that anyone has? One of the things I want to just mention for seam allowances, when we're adding seam allowances, we are always folding the seam allowance on the pattern the same direction that we would fold it on the garment when we're sewing it. So when we're truing our seam allowances, we're using this pointed ruler or pointed tracing wheel, and we're folding it. Let's say we have the side seam going to the back. We're folding the back under so that it's going that direction and it's mimicking the shape of the armhole. I can do an example if anyone wants to see an example. Let me know in the comments if you would like that. Brandy is asking if you wanted a cowl look to the V, would that be similar to adding pleats? It is exactly similar. So just like what we did, we marked those where we would want them to be. And the trick with a cowl neckline is it has to be on the bias. So cowls can be done with flat pattern. It's more fun to drape it. I know somebody said draping is fun in the chat. It is so much fun, but we can see on the bias here, we can see we get such a beautiful cowl neckline. And of course, this is not a high drape fabric. This is a full average to full drape. But you can see the bias is often what gives it a really soft fold, and we can cut it on the pattern and shape those pleats as we would want them and open them up just like we did. All right, so someone wants to see an example of the seam allowances. 3 people actually. All right, so glad you guys are still with me. Let me just get some water quickly and we'll do that. Okay, I'm gonna do a seam allowance for the back, and the reason why is because this is gonna be like the clearest example. Another thing that I need to do is facings for this pattern, so I have not done any facings, and I always use the final pattern to create the facings. So I would use this, I would mark this as on a fresh piece of paper, and then I would mark my 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters, whatever it is. And I would often, if I have a sleeveless, I would do kind of a facing like this and continue it down like this. I still have to true this part up. I just saw that. Okay. But we're going to add seam allowances, and we have different options. You could take this, trace it onto a fresh piece of paper, and then add your seam allowances. That's going to be the cleanest, because if we're going to be adding scraps or even just taping the whole thing to a new piece of paper, yeah, I wouldn't do it with scraps like this example is what I'm saying. But I'm going to show you the example so that you can see. Okay, so my center back, let's say I want to do an ample center back because I'm going to have a zipper back there, even though it's going to be invisible. I just want to have enough. Okay, now whenever we have a curve coming to a point on the armhole, anywhere, neckline, center back, center front, anything that we imagine the other side is coming to a point, we have to consider this in our seam allowance. And that's why I say you have to fold the seam allowance when you're marking it. So this is our seam line here. I just folded on the seam line. This is my seam allowance cutting line, the cutting line of 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. I can mark that all the way in. And here, I usually just cut it off. So if you imagine like the tracing wheel, you could use the tracing wheel through the layers and get that line here. Now we also have to add the seam allowance to the neckline here. So I haven't done that yet. If we did that, this is my pointed tracing wheel line. We then have to add the seam allowance like this all the way around it. Okay, now you can see if I wouldn't have folded this seam allowance, I would not have this extra curve here because it mirrors the shape. It's symmetrical. So we need to do that whenever we're adding seam allowances. We imagine how is that seam allowance going to be folded in the sewing process. It's going to be folded like this. And even if it was folded to this side, to the wearer's left side, we would still need to mimic and mirror that curve. Okay, so it's the same thing over here. Let's say we do, I know now I'm using all these scraps, I would have to grab a big piece of paper, but I don't want to take up more time. I know you guys are all being so patient. Okay, so we're going to add the seam allowance here. And there are different options for which direction the seam allowance goes on a princess seamed garment. Some people might want top stitching on the garment, and they might do it on the lower section. They might decide to do it on the upper section. They might have top stitching on both sides of the seam. This would mean we're folding to one side on one pattern piece and we're folding to the other side on the other pattern piece, meaning the seam is open. It depends on what you want. So you also have to think about that sewing process. Let's say we want it to all go to one side. We have to consider this pattern piece in the mix. Okay, so let's first close this up. And actually, I should not be cutting it. I should be folding and checking. Oops. Okay, so I've folded this seam over. That's as if the fabric is folding this direction, right? That's as if I needed a top stitch on this side and maybe this side is also going that direction. Okay, if we had seam allowance, it's all going up. On this side over here, I have to mimic this shape onto the seam allowance. If I don't mimic that shape and get this kind of curve, I'm getting this here, and that's not going to mimic the shape I need for the upper section. So for this example, this is why most princess seams end up pointing downward so that they don't have this strange shape on the seam allowance. So if we were to do it to this pattern piece and go downward with the seam allowance. Is this making sense to people? Okay, Susan is asking, should we always use the 5-dart sloper instead of the 2-dart? No, I mean, that's why you make a 2-dart sloper, because then it goes much quicker for styles that you want just 2 darts with. So you definitely don't need to always start with a 5-dart. I like to start with a 5-dart if I know it's super fitted, because then I can get the most, like the tightest fit, because this garment needs to be quite slimming, otherwise it's not going to be. So I'm going to shave off a little bit here, and I'm going to be adding a little bit because I did add a little bit over here, I believe. Okay, so I want a nice continued shape there, and then I'm going to go ahead and shave that off so I don't mess up my seam allowance and take the wrong edge. Okay. So this is one of the reasons why I don't want to keep going with all the facings and seam allowance, because you really actually have to think about the sewing process during this, and it's actually really not easy to do. So you have to think, okay, which direction do I want those seams to be pressed to, right? It's not like a quick, oh, I'll do this, this, and this. You have to really be cognizant of it and know what you want. Okay, so let's say, of course, we've trued these seams and we're making sure the whole thing is matching up. It's perfect before we're doing the seam allowances. And then we're acting as if these two were sewn together. And then we're drawing this seam line here. Okay, now since I have a few different ones going, just double check that it showed through there okay with the pointed tracing wheel. And we can see this original seam allowance line works just by chance, just by angle chance. Let me tell you, if you don't do this test, you wouldn't have known. And this one, we don't need to have this point up here. That point is not needed because when we folded it over, this is our traced line here. Okay. So this then becomes our traced seam line instead of that point. And it looks more like this. And that's more like a commercial or indie pattern would look. It's cut off there because it mimics the shape that the fabric is going toward. Okay, so it's gonna look more like that. Okay, then we would have a little notch if we want to notch. We can, but when we have a point like here, it's clear that that's a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance or 1 centimeter. If we wanted to, we could notch it, but to me, anytime there's a point, it's clear we don't need to notch. I often am not notching seam allowances because I know I tend to go with either 1 inch or 3/8, or if it's design related, I'll add quite a bit, like 3 inches or more, or not more usually, but and as long as it's not around curves, like an armhole curve, I would never add too much in that area because you're not going to be able to see the true fit of the armhole for that seam allowance. So things like princess seams, armholes, I try to know that my sloper is fitting, and then I am pretty confident in giving what I need to give. For this back armhole that I did take off quite a bit, I could notch it out and give 1 inch in that area, or 2.5 centimeters, or notch it out up here. But I can already tell by the thickness of the strap, I don't really want it thicker than that. So yeah. And in looking at this symmetrical, if I look here at the grid on the back, and then this is 3 inches out, 3 inches out, that's looking really really kind of narrow to me. If anything, like I might want it more scooped a little bit. I think I do. So anyways, those are all kind of the details that we're looking at, and anytime we're changing stuff, we always have to chew it up, which I didn't shave this off here. But yeah, are there any other questions? Let me just quickly look at the comments. Okay, sorry. Okay, the seam allowance thing makes so much sense now. So glad that makes sense. A little confused on the downside seams versus upside seams on the side princess seam. So it just depends on which way you press the seam allowances. If they press down, you have to fold them down or let them lay down. If you have them up, then you have to make sure that seam allowance is kind of folded upward on the one side that's needed. So you're always thinking about, okay, what if you have an open faced seam, meaning it's not pointed to one direction or the other direction, it's open on both sides. That means you have to check both sides of the seam allowance and fold it in both sides. Okay, yes, there will be a replay. Beth, so glad that you've joined. It makes a lot of sense and explains a few issues with the historical garments you've had previously. The whole live has been really interesting. The first one you've joined. So glad that you've joined the whole thing. That's how another seamstress in our group does her pattern pieces that come to a point in the seam allowance. Exactly. Sometimes those can be confusing when left in hand and trying to line things up. So I always think of the points as that's my seam line, and that's the easiest thing to think of. In production patterns, they are notching a lot of the times for alignment. We definitely would be notching a lot more things if we had sleeves. We would want to have notches on the sleeves to the armhole and make sure that that's aligned. But since I don't have sleeves in this, I have not done as many notches. What else? Anything else? Okay, so glad so many people joined for this whole thing. 3 hours. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. I've absolutely enjoyed it. And you can always come back to this in the future as well. If you're getting stuck on things, just think of all of the things that we talked about as far as closing darts, slashing open, slashing and closing things, the darts and waist shaping and all that stuff. The sloper is your friend. So if you don't have a sloper that fits you yet, you definitely want to take, I would recommend the course that I teach. It really is, in my opinion, like giving you a very good result, of course, and then you can make your dress form with the moulage as well, which I love to fit with. I'm doing that most of the time now, and even that I love to do the drape tests on me. That drape test that I did with the fabric before, let me try to find it quickly. What I like to do with this is I actually pin the fabric to my body, to the dress that I'm wearing underneath, to let it hang. And so that's another little trick that you can do. Don't think of, if you don't have a dress form and you can't let it drape, pin it to whatever you're wearing and just start playing around with it and seeing, is this fabric really working with the silhouette I want? I had another fabric that I absolutely love, and I really, really love the color and everything, but it just wasn't working with the pleats. And so this, we go into depth with the Design, Define, and Love Your Style online course. That's really about understanding silhouettes, the best silhouettes for your body type, and the best fabrics to use. And we're definitely testing that out. Will I show the fitting aspect of this after I cut the fabric? So the fitting I actually already did with the sloper. So the sloper, when I was doing this in the fitting part, here, that's when I made it tighter. The sloper already fits me. So I will be fitting it as I go. And I don't know if I'm going to have time to film all that. We could maybe, if you want to do a live sewing,
thing. We could maybe work something out with that. But it's going to be a lot of sewing, taking it off, ironing it, putting it on. It's like that constant process as you're sewing the garment, which I'm usually in my undergarments. So I'd have to sort that part out for a live. So that would not work. But I think that, once the sloper fits and once we've pinned it to the right amount of ease that we want, if we're doing something in particular, like this is a very fitted midriff, I needed it to be tight there. I want it to be really fitted in the princess seams. And I don't want any gaping at the armhole. So this is what I checked in the sloper fitting beforehand, and then we made those adjustments to the pattern live during this as well. So you saw that. Is there anything else? Looking forward to making a sloper. Paula, wonderful. So glad to hear that. You're nearly finished with a moulage fitting. So glad. Okay, anything else? Sorry. Was late. Looking forward to the replay. So glad you'll tune into that replay. And if you've joined, especially if you joined for this whole thing, thank you so much. I love seeing you all, and it's absolutely wonderful to see all of you and to tune in. And I know I talked a lot. I hope you learned a few things, and I really loved teaching this and sharing my process with you, because I think a lot of the times, you just don't know how different pattern makers think until you walk through their processes with them. And one thing I've learned from working in the industry for nearly 20 years, when I was in the garment industry, was that every pattern maker thinks differently. And if you do things slightly differently, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's a different method. And so, trying those things out in the ways that make sense to you. And it's sometimes trial and error when you're doing this pattern manipulation process. So the biggest thing with pattern manipulation is that we want to try to close the darts. If we don't have the darts on the garment, we want to try to close the darts. That is the biggest thing where people fail, is that they're just taking darts off of sides, or like for pants and trousers, they're not closing the darts in the back of the pants, which cause gaping in the back of the pants. So the biggest thing with dart manipulation and pattern manipulation is closing the darts, shifting them into different design lines, different design features, pleats, gathering, shirring, tucks, pin tucks, design lines. Be as creative as you want with this stuff, and you can end up closing and spreading things and doing all that fun stuff that pattern makers love to do. So I think that's everything for today. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you joining me. All right, take care, everyone.